2 hours after my youngest son's funeral. His professor called me with a voice that was trembling so violently I could barely understand the words. "Mr. Grant, you have to come to my office immediately. Please come alone. Do not tell anyone where you're going. I have something you must see right now." When I reached the office door, I heard low, threatening male voices inside the room. Through the tiny crack in the door, I saw a person I never expected to see in my entire life, and my heart stopped beating completely. "Thank you for staying with me while I share the darkest moment I have ever lived through. Please leave a comment telling me where you are and what time it is right now, because I want to know who is walking through this nightmare beside me." 2 hours after we buried my 24-year-old son, Mason, my phone rang and shattered whatever was left of my heart. I was sitting alone in the study of our home on Alhambra Circle in Coral Gables, Florida, still wearing the exact black suit I had worn to the cemetery that morning. The late afternoon sun was pouring long golden shadows across the walnut desk where Mason and I used to sketch building designs together when he was still in high school. He had been brilliant, gentle, full of dreams that would now never come true. The doctors had called it sudden multi-organ failure, extremely rare, completely unexplainable in a perfectly healthy young man. 6 days from the first symptom to the moment he took his last breath in my arms. My wife Emily had already been taken by cancer 4 years earlier. Now Mason was gone too, and the house felt like a tomb filled with ghosts that whispered his name. Dad Jackson's voice came softly from the living room, the same caring voice that had comforted me every day since Mason died. My eldest son had barely left my side, bringing me coffee, straightening the house, telling me over and over that he was here for me. "You need anything at all," I couldn't answer him because the grief was choking me. The last mourners had left an hour earlier, their empty words still ringing in my ears. "He's in a better place. Time heals all wounds. God needed another angel." Those words felt like salt poured into an open wound. That was exactly when my phone buzzed on the desk. The name on the screen made me sit up straight. Professor Laura Bennett, Mason's architecture professor at the University of Miami. The woman who had stood sobbing at the graveside that morning as she placed a single white lily on the casket. I answered with a voice that sounded like gravel. Professor Bennett. Her breathing was ragged, panicked, terrified. "Mr. Grant, I found something in Mason's studio belongings that you have to see with your own eyes. I can't explain it over the phone. Please come to my office in the architecture building. 3rd floor. Right now." My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. What kind of something, I managed to ask. "I can't tell you here," she whispered, voice breaking. "Please come alone. Mr. Grant, and whatever you do not tell anyone you're coming. Not even your other son. This is dangerous. Please trust me." The call ended abruptly. I sat there staring at the phone, heart pounding in my ears like a drum. Dangerous. What could possibly be dangerous about my dead son's school projects? But the pure terror in her voice was impossible to ignore. Jackson appeared in the doorway, concern written all over his face. "Everything okay?" "Dad," I forced the weakest smile I could manage. "Just need to take a drive and clear my head for a little while. I won't be long." He crossed the room and pulled me into a strong, warm hug. "Take all the time you need. I'll be right here when you get back." 20 minutes later, I pulled into the nearly empty visitor parking lot at the University of Miami. The campus was quiet on a Saturday evening. Palm trees swaying gently in the warm breeze, the sky turning orange and pink over Biscayne Bay. The architecture building stood tall and mostly dark ahead of me. I took the stairs 2 at a time to the 3rd floor, my footsteps echoing too loudly in the empty hallway. Professor Bennett's office door was cracked open just enough for a thin blade of light to spill into the darkness. Low, angry. Threatening voices drifted out from inside. "You were told to stay out of this," a male voice growled, cold and vicious. "Give it to me now or you'll end up like the kid." Please, Professor Bennett begged, her voice cracking with pure terror. I moved closer and looked through the narrow gap, and the world stopped turning. She was backed against a tall gray filing cabinet, hands raised in surrender, tears streaming down her face, body shaking with fear, and the man standing over her, gripping Mason's worn leather journal like a weapon, was Jackson, my own firstborn son, the one who had just hugged me 20 minutes ago and promised to take care of me. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I shoved the door open so hard it slammed against the wall. Jackson spun around, raw fury flashing across his face for one split second before he forced it into perfect, innocent shock. "Dad, what are you doing here?" For a long moment I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't believe what my eyes were seeing. My own son stood there holding Mason's private journal, wearing the same expression of gentle concern he had worn at the funeral when he promised to help me through the grief. Behind him, Professor Bennett looked like she was staring at her own death. "I could ask you the exact same thing." "Jackson," I finally said, voice flat and hollow. "You told me you were staying home." He glanced down at the journal, then back at me, and the mask slid perfectly into place. Soft, apologetic, loving. I couldn't just sit around the house doing nothing. "Dad, I came to collect Mason's projects and models before the university throws everything into storage. I didn't want his life's work to disappear forever." He turned to Professor Bennett with a warm, grateful smile that looked so real it made my stomach turn. "She's been incredibly kind, helping me gather everything together." She nodded in tiny, frantic jerks, eyes wide and pleading, silently screaming for me to understand the truth. Every instinct in my body was howling that this was wrong, terribly wrong. But his explanation sounded so reasonable, so exactly like the thoughtful older brother everyone believed him to be. "That's very kind of you," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Jackson stepped closer and placed a steady hand on my shoulder, the same hand that had rested on my arm at the cemetery while I wept over Mason's casket. "Let's go home, Dad. You shouldn't be driving around Miami tonight. You look exhausted. I'll follow you back and make sure you get in safe." His touch felt like fire against my skin. As he gently steered me toward the door, Professor Bennett moved lightning fast. Something small and white slipped into my suit pocket, her fingers ice cold against mine. I glanced back for one heartbeat, our eyes locked, and her lips formed a single silent word: "Run." Outside in the warm evening air, Jackson walked me all the way to my car like the perfect, caring son the world saw. His silver Audi sat 3 spaces away, gleaming under the streetlights. "See you at the house," he said, pulling me into another tight hug that crushed the air from my lungs. "Drive safe, Dad. I love you." He climbed into his car and drove off first. Only when his taillights disappeared around the corner did I dare reach into my pocket with shaking fingers. A torn scrap of notebook paper, handwriting frantic and shaky, real journal in his room. Under the mattress. "Run." Tears I didn't know I still had spilled over as the full horror crashed into me. The son who had just hugged me and said "I love you" might have murdered his own brother. The drive back to Coral Gables felt endless. Every red light an accusation. Every shadow a threat. When I turned onto Alhambra Circle, Jackson's Audi was already parked in its usual spot, lights off, waiting like nothing had happened. I sat in the car in the dark for 5 full minutes until every light in the house went out, and he disappeared down the hallway toward his bedroom. Only then did I slip inside my own home like a thief. Mason's room hit me like a physical blow. The air still carried the faint trace of his cologne. His bed was still unmade exactly as he left it the morning he first got sick. Architecture textbooks were piled in the chaotic order only he understood. The half-finished scale model of his senior thesis still sat under the desk lamp I had forgotten to turn off. I dropped to my knees and lifted the mattress with arms that felt like lead. There, pressed flat against the box spring, was the real leather journal, the one Mason carried everywhere like a second heart. I opened it with fingers that would not stop trembling. Week 1 entry. Mason's happy handwriting. Jackson gave me these premium vitamins today. Said they'd help with the insane stress of finals week. He's been so supportive lately, checking on me every day, bringing me soup when I feel run down. It feels good to have my big brother back. Week 3. Stomach hurts all the time now, so tired I fall asleep in class. Jackson keeps pushing the vitamins. Says I have to be patient. Maybe he's right. Week 5. This isn't normal. Looked up every symptom online and nothing matches. Every single time I take one of those pills, I wake up feeling worse, like I'm being hollowed out from the inside. Week 7. Waited until Jackson was at the gym and finally checked the bottle when he wasn't looking. No brand, no label, nothing. Just weird chemical codes stamped on the plastic. Took a photo. My hands won't stop shaking. Why would he give me something like this? A small photograph was taped to the page, an innocent amber bottle that now looked like pure evil. The final entry, dated 3 days before Mason died. I'm terrified, genuinely terrified. If I show this journal to Dad, it will rip our family apart. There has to be some explanation. Jackson is my brother. He loves me. He wouldn't do something like this. He couldn't. Could he? The sentence ended in the middle, the pen trailing off the page like his strength had simply run out. I sat on Mason's bed with the journal pressed against my chest and sobbed without sound, the kind of crying that comes from a place deeper than tears. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, slow and deliberate. Dad Jackson called, his voice gentle, caring, the same voice that had sung Mason to sleep when he was little. He was coming toward the room. I wiped my face, shoved the journal inside my jacket, and stumbled onto the small balcony as quietly as possible. Mason's room had old metal fire escape stairs zigzagging down the side of the house. I had yelled at him countless times for using them as a shortcut. Tonight, they were my only way out. I swung my leg over the railing just as the bedroom door opened behind me. The night air was cool and damp from earlier rain. My shoes slipped on the wet metal. My hands burned on the cold railing. But I kept going. The journal pressed hard against my ribs like Mason himself was holding on. 20 feet down. 15. 10. When my feet finally hit the grass, I ran. The side gate creaked open under my shaking hands. I spilled out onto Alhambra Circle, chest heaving, tears mixing with sweat. My car sat right there in the driveway, but starting the engine would bring Jackson to the window in seconds, hands trembling violently. I pulled out my phone and dialed the one number I had called thousands of times in 17 years. Robert Hayes, my executive assistant of 17 years. The man who had been my right hand through every crisis the company ever faced. The man who had held my hand in the hospital when Emily died. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Grant, is everything all right?" His voice was the first safe thing I had heard in days. "Robert," I rasped, barely able to speak. "I need help. I'm on the corner of Alhambra and Segovia. Can you pick me up right now? I'm 20 minutes away. Stay hidden, sir." I crawled deeper into a neighbor's thick hedge, thorns tearing my suit, and watched my own house like a stranger. Lights came on in Mason's room, then the balcony, then the hallway. Jackson stepped outside, phone to his ear, scanning the darkness. I could feel his eyes searching for me. Finally, Robert's dark gray Toyota glided up with headlights off. I ran to it and collapsed inside. "Drive," I whispered. He pulled away smoothly, calm as always. "Where are we going?" "Sir, anywhere but here." I pressed my hand against the journal hidden beneath my jacket. 10 minutes later, we were locked inside the underground garage of Robert's small condo in downtown Miami. Only when the door was bolted and the blinds were drawn did I let the entire story pour out in broken, sobbing pieces. Professor Bennett's terrified phone call, finding Jackson threatening her in her office. The warning note slipped into my pocket. The real journal hidden under the mattress. Every single entry. The photograph of the unlabeled bottle. When I handed Robert the journal, his hands began to shake so hard the pages rustled. He read in complete silence, face cycling through grief, horror, rage, and finally something that looked like hatred. When he closed the journal, tears stood in his eyes that had never cried in front of me once in 17 years. Jackson murdered him, he whispered, voice cracking. Your own son murdered Mason. The words spoken aloud broke something inside me all over again. Before I could answer, the television on the wall turned itself to the evening news. The anchor's voice filled the room like ice water. Breaking news from the University of Miami campus. Professor Laura Bennett was found dead this evening after apparently falling from the 5th floor of the architecture building. Authorities are currently treating it as a possible suicide. The journal slipped from my hands and hit the floor. A sound came out of me I didn't recognize. Half scream, half animal howl. She had tried to save my son's memory, and they threw her from a window for it. Robert caught me before I hit the ground. She died because she was brave, he said, voice shaking with fury. We will not let her death be for nothing. 2 days later, we sat at Robert's small kitchen table, surrounded by cold coffee and building blueprints. Both of us running on pure rage and grief sharp enough to cut steel. My eyes were dry and burning because I had barely slept more than an hour at a time since reading Mason's last words. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his handwriting pleading with me across the pages. Robert tapped the legal pad covered in his perfect block letters. You still have master keycard access to every office in Grant Tower on Brickell Avenue, including Jackson's suite 2800 on the 28th floor. He'll know I was there, I said, voice raw from crying. Not if we're smarter than he is, Robert answered, turning his laptop toward me. Blueprints of the 28th floor glowed on the screen. Security cameras cover the hallways, but I ordered a military-grade signal jammer online. It will loop the camera feed for exactly 4 minutes, more than enough time. 4 minutes to find evidence that my son murdered my other son. 4 minutes to save Mason's name and destroy everything I thought my life was. That night at 2:00 a.m. We parked 2 blocks from Grant Tower. I wore black gloves and a dark hoodie pulled low over my face, moving like a ghost through the city I had helped build. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the master key card. 4 minutes starts the second you swipe, Robert whispered through the tiny earpiece. I walked through the side service entrance, took the freight elevator to 28. The hallway was dead silent under the harsh fluorescent lights. Suite 2800 opened with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in my head. Jackson's office smelled exactly like him. Leather, expensive cologne, ambition. I sat at his desk and woke the computer with fingers that felt numb. Password prompt. I tried every obvious combination and failed. Then, hating myself for even thinking it, I typed Mason's exact birth date. July 22nd, 2001. The desktop opened like a final betrayal. A folder labeled private sat right in the center, locked with a second layer of security. I held the phone up to the monitor so Robert could see. 10 seconds later, his remote app flashed green, and the folder opened. Inside were dozens and dozens of emails that turned my blood to ice, from Jackson Grant to Thomas Carter. CFO, the problem needs to be handled quickly and quietly. From Thomas Carter back, I can source it from a contact in Tampa. Completely untraceable, slow acting. Looks exactly like natural organ failure. 20,000 cash. From Jackson, do it. Once he's gone, the company is mine alone. We split the $3 million offshore exactly as agreed. From Thomas Carter, your $900,000 in gambling debts disappear. I retire to the Bahamas. We both win. I photographed every single message while silent tears ran down my face. 45 seconds, Robert warned, his own voice cracking. I shut the computer down, wiped the keyboard with my sleeve, locked the door behind me, and took the stairs 2 at a time. I slid back into the car with 11 seconds to spare. Robert read every screenshot in complete silence, jaw clenched so tight I could hear his teeth grinding. "We have proof," I said, voice hoarse from crying. "But we need more. We need his actual voice. We need the world to hear what he really is." Robert looked at me with eyes that understood everything. "Then we go back tomorrow and plant a bug." The next afternoon, I walked openly into Grant Tower like it was any other workday. Employees stopped me in the lobby with soft condolences and wet eyes. I thanked them with a smile that felt carved into my face. Jackson's assistant told me he was across town in client meetings and wouldn't return until evening. Perfect. I stepped into his empty office, closed the door softly, and dropped to my knees under the desk like a man praying for forgiveness. From my pocket, I pulled the tiny wireless microphone Robert had overnighted. Voice activated, 50-foot range, completely invisible. I pressed it into the shadowed corner where wood met metal, and for one heartbeat rested my forehead against the cool desk and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mason. I'm so sorry I didn't see." Then I walked out as calmly as I had walked in. By 5:30 that evening, we were back in Robert's condo, headphones on, waiting with held breath. At 5:34, Jackson's voice came through crystal clear, cold and triumphant. "Thomas, it's me." The old man went to the university asking questions, but the professor's suicide closed that door for good. There's no evidence left. Just move the offshore funds faster. 2 weeks from tonight, I'm announced president at the gala. Then we liquidate everything and disappear. A long pause. Then, lower. Colder. Bitter, I should have done this years ago. He was always Dad's favorite. Mason this, Mason that. Well, not anymore. I asked Robert to play it again. And again. And again. Each time the satisfaction in Jackson's voice carved another piece out of my soul. We had exactly 7 days until the annual Grant Development Gala at the Four Seasons Miami. 500 of the most powerful people in South Florida, investors, board members, every major news outlet. The perfect stage for the truth. I called the AV team myself and told them the founder wanted to give a surprise tribute to his late son during the event. They never questioned me. I quietly invited Detective Marcus Lopez and asked him to be present in plain clothes because I had something he needed to see. For 7 straight nights, Robert and I worked in that small condo, building the presentation, every page of the journal, every email, every second of audio, timed to the exact millisecond. I barely ate, barely slept. I existed only on grief and fury and the sound of Mason's voice in my head begging me to make this right. The night of the gala arrived. The ballroom glittered under massive crystal chandeliers, marble floors shining, the air thick with perfume, champagne, and money. Jackson stepped onto the stage in a midnight blue Tom Ford suit, smiling the smile that had charmed investors for years. Polite applause swelled like he was already king. He began the speech about legacy and family values, his voice cracking perfectly when he mentioned Mason's name. Cameras flashed. Then every light in the ballroom died for 3 full seconds. When they blazed back on, I was standing right beside him on the stage. 500 gasps sucked the air from the room at once. Jackson's face turned the color of ash. "Dad, what are you doing here?" His voice cracked like the little boy he used to be. I took the microphone from his shaking hand. "I'm here to tell the truth about how my son Mason really died." From the control booth, Robert hit play. The giant screen lit up with page after page of Mason's journal, his handwriting growing more frantic and terrified with every entry. Then the photographs of the unmarked bottle, then the emails in stark white text on black background about poison and millions. Then the recorded phone call, Jackson's own voice filling the ballroom. He was always Dad's favorite. Well, not anymore. The room exploded into chaos. Phones rose everywhere like a forest of judgment. Thomas Carter shot to his feet in the third row, screaming, "You swore it was completely untraceable." Jackson screamed back, "You're the one who bought the poison for $20,000. 500 witnesses watched my eldest son and my CFO tear each other apart, while the truth burned brighter than the chandeliers." Detective Marcus Lopez and 6 uniformed officers pushed through the ballroom doors. Jackson tried to bolt off the stage, but the crowd had already become a cage of phones and fury. The footage went viral before the night was over. Yet somehow both men managed to slip away in the chaos before handcuffs could be placed. The evidence was ironclad, but a clever defense lawyer could still create reasonable doubt in court. We needed one final, airtight, on-the-record confession to law enforcement. Robert created 2 cash-bought burner phones and sent identical texts from each man to the other. To Jackson from Thomas, "Meet me 2 a.m. Warehouse 14, Port Miami. Bring offshore account numbers. Come alone or we both rot in prison for life." To Thomas from Jackson, the exact same message. Detective Lopez agreed to surround the warehouse but stay hidden until they damned themselves. Robert and I arrived an hour early, climbed the rusty metal loft inside abandoned Warehouse 14, and hid behind stacks of old pallets. A professional recorder sat between us, red light blinking steadily. At 2:03 a.m., headlights swept across the walls. Thomas Carter walked in wearing an expensive coat, collar turned up, eyes darting nervously in every direction. At 2:09, Jackson stormed in, furious and sweating. They saw each other and froze, realization hitting them like a sledgehammer. Jackson ran to the only exit door. It was chained and padlocked from the outside. Their argument detonated instantly, echoing off the metal walls. "This is your fault," Thomas shouted, voice cracking with panic. "I told you to stretch the dose over 8 months, not 4, Jackson screamed back. "You're the one drowning in $900,000 of gambling debt. I just wanted what was rightfully mine," Thomas sneered. "How did you even get him to take it every single day without suspicion?" Jackson laughed, a cold, hollow sound that turned my stomach. "Easy. Told my little brother they were premium vitamins for stress. He trusted me completely. Wrote everything in that stupid journal but never told Dad because he was too loyal to accuse his own brother. Every word recorded in perfect quality. Then every floodlight in the warehouse blazed on at once. Miami-Dade police, hands in the air. "Do not move." Jackson looked up to the loft and saw me standing there. Pure hatred twisted his face into something unrecognizable. "You did this." He charged toward the metal stairs like a madman. Robert stepped in front of me, arms out. Officers poured in from every door, weapons drawn. Thomas Carter threw his hands up immediately. "I surrender. I'll tell you everything. I'll talk." Jackson tried to run again, but I was already coming down the stairs. He lunged at me, grabbing my jacket with both hands, eyes wild. He was nothing. Just in the way of my inheritance, I stared into eyes that no longer looked human. "He was your brother, Jackson. He loved you." For one split second, something flickered in his face. Maybe regret, maybe fear, maybe both. Then he whispered, voice breaking, "Don't talk to me about love." He tried to swing. Robert shoved him backward hard. Jackson stumbled, fell, hit the concrete floor with a sickening thud. Officers swarmed, cuffing both men while they kept screaming accusations at each other. Every word captured on body cameras for the prosecutors. 8 weeks later, we sat in courtroom 5B of the Miami-Dade County Courthouse at 1351 Northwest 14th Street. The gallery was packed with reporters, former employees, Mason's classmates, and friends who needed to see justice done. Judge Elena Ramirez presided. Steel gray hair, sharp eyes, a reputation for absolute fairness without softness. Both defendants looked thin, pale, broken in rumpled suits that no longer fit. Prosecutor Monica Alvarez laid out the entire case, Mason's journal documenting every symptom and growing terror. The emails discussing payment for an untraceable poison and the $3 million offshore split. The recorded phone calls. The warehouse confessions witnessed by multiple officers and captured on video. Defense attorneys tried every angle. Entrapment, tampered evidence, grief-driven obsession on my part. Judge Ramirez shut them down coldly. The confessions were voluntary, made in the presence of sworn law enforcement officers. The evidence is overwhelming and admissible. Witness after witness took the stand. Mason's college roommate testified with tears in his eyes that Mason had grown suspicious of the vitamins Jackson kept pushing, but didn't want to believe his own brother would hurt him. A junior accountant from the company testified to seeing Thomas Carter and Jackson in closed-door meetings twice a week for months, always looking nervous and secretive. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours. When they filed back in, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. On the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendants guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. On the charges of grand theft and fraud, guilty. Gasps and quiet sobs filled the courtroom. Judge Ramirez looked at Jackson and Thomas with ice in her eyes. The cold, calculated way you ended a brilliant young life for nothing more than money is beyond human comprehension. You poisoned a trusting brother slowly, day by day, while pretending concern and watching him die. This was greed in its purest, ugliest form. She sentenced Jackson Grant and Thomas Carter to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Jackson looked across the courtroom at me one last time. His eyes held something I could no longer read. Regret, hatred, desperation. Maybe all three. I turned away. I could not look at the stranger wearing my son's face. Officers cuffed both men and led them out through the side door. Chains rattling, footsteps echoing down the long hallway like the closing of a tomb. Outside, reporters swarmed with cameras and microphones flashing. I raised one hand to quiet them. Justice has been served today, but it does not bring my son back. I walked away before they could ask anything more. 6 months later, I stood at 2200 Miracle Mile, Suite 310 in Coral Gables. A polished brass sign on the door now read, "The Mason Grant Memorial Architecture Scholarship Foundation," using a large portion of my personal fortune. We created full-ride scholarships for talented architecture students who could never otherwise afford college. The first recipient, Sarah Mitchell from Tampa, stood in the new office clutching her portfolio, tears running down her cheeks. "I promise I will make him proud," she whispered, voice shaking with emotion. I smiled, truly smiled. "For the first time in almost a year, I know you will. Sarah." Later that afternoon, I drove to Woodlawn Park Cemetery North. 2 graves lay side by side beneath a massive live oak. Emily's and Mason's. I placed white roses on Emily's grave and bright yellow daisies on Mason's, his favorite color since he was 5. Kneeling between them, I spoke softly to the warm Miami breeze. "He's helping others now. Son, your dreams are still building beautiful things." For the first time since the funeral, the breeze felt gentle instead of cruel. One son lost to death, one lost forever to greed. But Mason's legacy would now lift young dreamers toward the sky he never got to finish designing. This is my true story, raw, complete, and unfiltered. I was so busy building an empire that that I became blind to the poison growing inside my own home. I measured love in dollars and titles and corner offices, learned from every mistake I made. Talk to your children. Really listen to them with your whole heart. Wealth without love is poison in a pretty bottle. Family is the only legacy that truly matters, and greed can murder it faster than any drug. If this story reached you, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment telling me where you are and what lesson you will carry forward. Share it with someone who needs the warning. And thank you, truly thank you, from the bottom of a broken father's heart, for walking through this darkness with me.